Robinson Crusoe on Mars. Released in 1964, Robinson Crusoe on Mars reimagined Daniel Defoe's classic survival tale with a space-age twist. Instead of a shipwreck, an astronaut crash lands on the Red Planet, alone and battling the elements. At a time when sci-fi often leaned into fantasy or Cold War paranoia, this film took a different route, one rooted in plausible science. Director Byron Haskin, who had previously helmed War of the Worlds in 1953, reportedly consulted with NASA advisors to lend the story technical credibility, though exact documentation remains elusive. The Martian terrain wasn't crafted in a studio, it was filmed in the unforgiving heat of California's Death Valley. Cinematographer Winton C. Hoke, known for his mastery of color, used stark lighting and natural landscapes to transform Earth into something convincingly alien. While rumors persist that infrared photography was used to enhance the eerie visuals, no official production notes confirm this. Paul Manti carried most of the film solo as Major Christopher Draper, delivering a restrained yet powerful performance that explored the psychological toll of isolation, years before it became standard in space dramas. There's quiet speculation among genre fans that this film may have influenced later works like The Martian, given the thematic overlap of scientific problem-solving and human resilience. Despite its creative ambition, Robinson Crusoe on Mars was largely eclipsed at the box office by heavyweights like Goldfinger and Mary Poppins, both released the same year. Some film historians argue it was simply ahead of its time, arriving during a lull in serious science fiction before the genre's explosion later in the decade. Compared to today's CGI-heavy blockbusters, this forgotten gem relied on grounded storytelling and practical effects to make Mars feel real. No digital wizardry required. The Day the Earth Caught Fire. The Day the Earth Caught Fire, released in 1961, didn't need aliens or laser battles to unsettle audience. Instead, it leaned into real-world fears, nuclear brinkmanship, climate disruption, and media chaos. The plot hinges on simultaneous US and Soviet atomic tests that shift Earth's axis, triggering global weather collapse. While most early 60s sci-fi stuck to recycled 50s tropes or kid-friendly fare, this British film took a bold, adult approach. Director Val Guest, known for his Hammer horror work, reportedly used a sepia filter to mimic the sweltering heat of a planet unraveling. Though some speculate it also symbolized the moral haze of Cold War politics. The film takes place largely in a newspaper office, grounding its apocalyptic premise in the procedural grind of journalism. That choice made the disaster feel eerily plausible. Some film historians argue it was a precursor to the socially conscious sci-fi wave that would arrive later in the decade with titles like 2001, A Space Odyssey. Rumors persist that the ambiguous ending, with 2 newspaper headlines printed but only one hinted at, was a studio compromise, not the director's original vision. Whether true or not, the unresolved finale still sparks debate. Did humanity get a second chance, or was it already too late? The Day of the Tripids. In 1962, The Day of the Tripids delivered one of British cinema's strangest ecological nightmares. A meteor shower blinds most of humanity just as carnivorous, mobile plants begin their slow-motion takeover. Adapted from John Wyndham's best-selling 1951 novel, the film wrapped a B-movie premise in Cold War paranoia and post-war environmental anxiety. Directed by Hungarian-American filmmaker Steve Szekely, the production was riddled with conflict. Szekely's vision reportedly clashed with producers, and the film's tone took a sharp turn when horror cinematographer Freddie Francis was brought in to direct additional scenes. Francis helmed the lighthouse subplot, which many critics have noted feels disconnected from the main storyline. Despite its uneven structure, The Day of the Tripids has been quietly influential. Some film scholars point to its hospital wake-up sequence as a possible precursor to the opening of 28 Days Later. Others draw loose thematic lines to The Happening and Annihilation, where nature turns hostile in abstract, unsettling ways. Though initial reviews were lukewarm, the film found a second life in late-night television syndication. While it rarely makes the short list of sci-fi classics, The Day of the Tripids remains a standout from the early 60s. A period when science fiction was transitioning from creature features to more philosophical explorations. Queen of Blood. In 1966, a modest sci-fi horror flick called Queen of Blood quietly fused Cold War aesthetics with eerie futurism. and may have done more for the genre than anyone realized at the time. Directed by Curtis Harrington, and produced under Roger Corman's famously frugal eye, the film stitched together footage from two Soviet space epics, Nebuzoviot from 1959 and Mech Nav Strechu from 1963. Rather than feeling disjointed, the result gave the film a surreal, otherworldly tone that some argue added to its unsettling power. At the center was Florence Marley as the alien queen, green-skinned, hypnotic, and nearly silent. She spoke minimally but commanded every frame with a kind of vampiric elegance. Her scenes, brimming with early traces of body horror, preceded Alien by over a decade. Some film scholars have drawn parallels between the two, suggesting that Queen of Blood may have helped shape the aesthetic that Ridley Scott's Blockbuster later perfected. Adding to its cult appeal, the film featured early appearances by Dennis Hopper and John Saxon, long before they became genre icons. Though critics at the time wrote it off as another cheap Corman experiment, later restorations and retrospectives have sparked a reevaluation. Legends even tease that its eerie tone and visual style influenced more than just Alien. Whispers persist that it helped inspire the wave of cerebral sci-fi horror that followed in the 70s. The Flesheaters. Released in 1964, The Flesheaters took a hard left from the sanitized sci-fi of its era. Directed by Jack Curtis and produced on a minimal budget, the film stranded its characters on a remote island, then introduced a bizarre threat: microscopic organisms that dissolve human flesh. The villain? A rogue scientist with a murky past, often rumored to have ties to wartime experiments, though the film never confirms it outright. What gave the movie its bite wasn't just the premise, it was its unrelenting tone and boundary-pushing visuals. Special effects by Carl Hardman, better known for his later work on Night of the Living Dead, delivered grotesque sequences that startled audiences, including one infamous scene of internal disintegration that reportedly led to regional censorship. While mainstream critics dismissed it at the time, some horror historians now view it as a proto-splatter film that foreshadowed the gory excess of later cult classics. Legends tease that George Romero may have screened it before crafting his own undead opus in 1968, though no direct line has ever been drawn. Still, the film's isolated setting, grim pacing, and body horror elements echo in later works like John Carpenter's The Thing and Sam Raimi's The Evil Dead. In a decade when science fiction leaned toward optimism and spectacle, The Flesheaters went full nihilist, and for some, that makes it more daring than today's CGI-heavy blockbusters. The Unearthly Stranger. Released in 1963, The Unearthly Stranger quietly slipped past mainstream attention, but it delivered a psychological gut punch that modern blockbusters rarely attempt. Directed by John Krish, this low-budget British sci-fi film offered no flashy effects or alien invasions. Instead, it weaponized subtle tension. The plot centers on a government scientist who suspects his wife may not be human, but rather an alien infiltrator. It was a chilling metaphor for Cold War paranoia, echoing fears that the real threat wasn't from distant planets, but already living under the same roof. Krish's stark black and white cinematography stripped away comfort, casting every domestic scene in harsh contrast. The visuals weren't just aesthetic, they mirrored the protagonist's unraveling sense of reality. While the film never found a wide audience, some speculate its limited release was intentional, with rumors suggesting that its unsettling themes about identity, conformity, and trust hit too close to home during a time of social rigidity. Though it predates The Stepford Wives by over a decade, both films explore the horror of emotional disconnection beneath the surface of idealized domestic life. The Unearthly Stranger did it first, and arguably with more nerve. With today's rise of AI-generated personas and synthetic identities, the film's core question feels uncomfortably timely. What happens when appearances can't be trusted? The Terranauts. Released in 1967, The Terranauts is a British sci-fi oddity that crashed at the box office, but has since found a peculiar second life. Produced by Amicus Productions, better known for gothic horror anthologies, the film was adapted from Murray Leinster's mid-century novel The Wailing Asteroid. It centers on a group of radio astronomers who intercept a strange signal from space, only to be whisked away by aliens and conscripted into defending Earth. The premise was bold, but the execution, not so much. Shot on a shoestring budget, The film reportedly reused sets and props from other productions, with some rumors pointing to leftovers from the spy spoof The Deadly Bees. The production timeline was equally tight, with some insiders claiming it was filmed in just 10 days at Shepperton Studios. Critics at the time were unimpressed. One review from the Monthly Film Bulletin allegedly called it a dismal attempt at science fiction, citing uninspired performances and visibly flimsy sets. Yet, despite, or maybe because of, its limitations, the Terranauts has earned a cult following. Fans admire its unapologetic ambition and lo-fi charm, often comparing its tone to early episodes of Doctor Who. Some even speculate that its optimistic vision of alien contact influenced later British sci-fi television. Financially, the film was a flop, and Amicus quickly retreated from science fiction, focusing instead on the horror genre that had brought them modest success. Today, the Terranauts stands as a reminder of a time when science fiction didn't need a 9-figure budget to take risks. For some viewers, its raw creativity and earnest storytelling offer more than the polished spectacle of modern blockbusters. As film historian Kim Newman once quipped, "It's not good, but it's sincere." And sometimes sincerity is enough to make a film unforgettable. Whether that quote is apocryphal or not, it captures the strange appeal of a film that refused to aim small, even when it had almost nothing to work with. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment. Also consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell to get notified of our new videos each week. Thanks for watching.